Hi, I'm Jim Stroud, and this is my podcast. On July 5th, 2023, New York Local Law 144 takes effect. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you are using HR tech tools to hire or promote or make some sort of hiring decision, then you could pay as much as $1,500 a day per tool if the tool you're using is not compliant with that law. And as interesting as that is, I think it's only a harbinger of things to come. And I'm not the only one. My guest has a lot to say about it as well. Find out who that guest is and whether or not you should be concerned about New York City local law, even if you're not in New York City. All right, stay tuned. The Recruiting Life is a newsletter that gives a whimsical view of the world of work. It aspires to educate and entertain with articles, comics, videos, podcasts, contests, and more. It is produced on a weekly basis by yours truly, Jim Stroud, and is supported by readers like you. Topics in this newsletter include the future of work, current labor trends, sourcing passive candidates, and more. Subscribe now and receive it every Monday in your email by going to jimstroud.com/subscribe. That's jimstroud.com/subscribe. Link in the podcast description. Don't wait, subscribe now. Operators are standing by. Hello and welcome to the Jim Stroud Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Special guest, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, Jim, thanks for having me. So I'm Zach Long of Conductor AI, and my firm specializes in AI and AI compliance.
AI compliance, that is a hot topic these days. I'm thinking specifically of the New York Local Law 144, getting a lot of buzz in New York City.
Yes, sir.
Tell my listeners about that.
Sure. So I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar. If you're not, New York City Local Law 144 is America's first punitive AI law. And what I mean by that, it is the first law that comes into effect that has punishments for noncompliance. This law, it goes live on July 5th in New York City, and any employer that is using, well, the law is sort of referred to as like the AI bias law, but it's actually, the scope is a little broader than that. Anyone that's using software to automate the hiring process or the promotion process needs to get an annual bias audit on that software, else they face fines and potential litigation.
Now, the fines that I've heard go as much as $1,500 a day per software. Is that true?
That's correct. So yeah, it's up to $1,500 a day. This is now speculation. So yes, that's correct. My speculation is it's not actually quite likely to be as enforced that way. This is totally speculative, just coming from me, but I suspect that the real impact is going to be on the litigation side, where you can now prove non-compliant hiring processes much more easily. Rather than having to go through like a discriminatory hiring lawsuit, you can just effectively assert my client was rejected under an ADT. It didn't have a bias audit. And my bet is that's how we'll actually see enforcement.
Wow. Do you think companies are hearing about this law and they're sweating and they're just bombarding you with phone calls saying, oh my gosh, I've heard about this law and ADT and I'm just nervous. Come and save me. You get a lot of phone calls?
So the past 2 weeks have definitely been Conductor AI's busiest. But that said, I think is definitely catching people a little by surprise. Like we're definitely getting inbounds from, and this is just my color. The people that are really acting on this legislation are not the big companies that was sort of the law seemed to be designed at. It's not like the Walmarts or Nike, Goldman Sachs. It's recruiting software companies, interestingly enough.
Hmm.
And that sort of comes out of how the law was written as to why they're sort of the most acutely attuned to it.
Okay. So they're the software companies are the ones really concerned or reaching out to you because they see it as a threat to their business if their customers
Yeah,
have to pay all these fines all of a sudden.
I think the fines are a little theoretical until they start to happen, and lawsuits are theoretical until people start to see them in the news or until it happens to you.
Sure.
But for these recruiting software companies, they're being asked by their clients who are thinking about buying their services, hey, have you done an AI bias audit? Hey, are you compliant with this law? And that's when the sales guy has to say no or escalate to the internal leadership or the lawyer. They're the first people to sort of be like, I need to act and jump on this.
Do you think once people start getting fined, that companies will say, you know what, we're going to just stop all technology and do it all by hand? Do you think that will happen?
I don't know. What do you think, Jim? I feel
I
like
doubt
that.
it. I sort of think the cynical side of me is thinking that, okay, you're going to fine me for this software, then I'm going to sue the software companies because I bought a product from them. They should have known better. So now I'm going to sue the software companies to get my money back. I think that might happen.
I mean, that's possible. It definitely like the people that are acting first are definitely the software companies. And again, we're definitely in the area of speculation here, but
Sure,
like
sure.
the I don't think the software can is just a tool. It can be misused, it can be used appropriately. I'm not A lot of the software companies that I've seen are like, we tell people to do X, Y, and Z with it, but then it's software. Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to. So I feel like this, if I'm the software company in that theoretical, I'd have a pretty good defense, which is like, look, I have 10 other customers. You're the only one doing it the wrong way. You know, this isn't onus isn't on me, it's on you.
Yeah,
But
I can see that too. And I can also see a software HR tech company saying, hey, our product is, excuse me, our product is AEDT compliant. And if I were an HR tech company and I had a product and I see this big behemoth of a law coming today, and I know it'll be other laws tomorrow, I'm going to do what I can to become AEDT compliant. And then I'm going to buy a bunch of Facebook ads, Google ads, and say, hey, our HR tech tool is compliant. Is your HR tech tool compliant? Knowing that pretty much
yeah,
all the others are not. So then start a stampede down to me to buy my HR tech product because it's AEDT compliant, and then make a killing before everybody else catches up.
you
That's what
totally.
that's how I would be thinking.
I think that's a completely reasonable take. I think you see people starting to do that a little bit. The law is so, and this is, again, my color, obviously. The law is strange.
Yeah.
Like the law is written in have you like dug into it by any chance? I'm just curious if you've actually like,
Not in depth.
yeah,
I mean, I've
fair
not
enough.
in depth.
The law is like the law has like a noble goal. The goal is to prevent AI systems from being discriminatory and biased. And that's like, I think pretty much everyone would agree. That's a good goal. That's something
Sure.
that we should want to do. The way the law is implemented is almost bizarre. So specifically, if you're a software company and you rank candidates, like if you are a software company and you rank candidates like 1 to 10, and the software is actually highly discriminatory, there isn't actually anything that stops you from using that as long as you're using another feature to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of weird. It's like the thing that you would expect this law to target, which is like how are our candidate ranking systems discriminatory, prejudiced, sexist, etc. That actually isn't what the law mandates you cover. What it mandates you cover is really not on the AI side as much, on the automated side. So it's like if something is automatically rejecting a candidate, that is the thing that needs to be audited. If you just do rankings, but you don't actually make the end decision, it isn't covered under this law, which I find a little unintuitive.
Hmm. I think the saying is the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
I think that how it goes. This whole situation reminds me of my Randstad Source Right days when I was working there. There was a new law that was creeping up that everybody was nervous about. GDPR, everybody knows about it now. But back then, it was sort of the whispered boogeyman, like,
Yeah.
new compliance law. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to deal with it, but we have to. And European countries jumped on it first, got it under control, so to speak, got the methodologies together, and then eventually came over to the United States. And I think it will probably happen again because of the AI Act. I think we were talking about it
Yep.
earlier.
Yep. That's the one.
Tell the people about the AI Act.
Yeah. So the America's law in New York City 144 is America's first law, and there's definitely a lot of consternation in the HR and the recruiting community around it. It is a vastly smaller and simpler thing than the EU AI Act. So the EU AI Act is a 167-page piece of legislation coming out of Brussels that is governing not, it also governs HR and recruiting software, but it also governs industrial applications, computer vision technology, police surveillance. It categorizes AI by how risky an application is, and then it poses many much stricter compliance requirements about what you can and cannot do with it and how you can prove it to a European official effectively.
Yeah, it wasn't well received by the business community. I think there's I think I saw a tweet or read about it on Verge. I'm not sure where I saw it from, but there was an open letter from different tech company CEOs saying, this is bad. You're going to handcuff our progress. You're going to stop innovation. Stop this now.
I'm empathetic to the business leaders. Like I don't see,
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely come from a tech background, so that should, but like I definitely, legislating is tough, and we should have empathy for, and their outcomes are generally, I do believe that they have very good intentions, but my firm has started to dig into this act, and we're seeing very similar things like we saw in NYC 144, where there was like a good idea, a good intent, and then you get into the nitty gritty of it, and you start being like, wait, I have to build an ISO 9000 QMS system? The hell is that? I've never heard of those words before. Like, that's not a thing that I have. It's like, well, you might need it. And that's how these laws work. And that's how.
It's weird. It's almost like you had to pick your poison. So like with the AI Act out of Europe, you said it was like 167 pages. And by contrast, the New York local law 144, I think it's like 25 pages.
I think it's even shorter. It's like 11. Yeah. It gives you a sense of how difficult.
Yeah. So you can have like a vague law that you have to sort of figure out, or you can have another law that's so complex that you can't figure out. It's really bizarre.
Jim, what do you think? Like, I certainly, I know that I definitely have my own opinions here, but do you feel like government should be racing to regulate AI right now? Like, do you think that's a moral good, if you will?
I think that no matter what happens over here, it's going to take a while. I mean, I remember when social networks were just gaining in popularity. I think with Facebook was just gaining in popularity. I think around 2008 is when I think Facebook started picking up steam, and then they didn't really have any laws or regulation around social media till 2016, 2012. I mean, it was like some many years later. So over here, when it comes over here in America, when it comes to regulating tech, we move really slowly. And I think the really slow is sometimes a good thing, because a lot of the legislators on the Hill don't understand the technology. They don't understand how fast it can change. And by the time they get around to figuring out that it's actually needed, it's changed probably 3 times over. So I think that a lot of the legislators here, they'll come up with some laws which will become irrelevant by the time they're actually implemented, or not irrelevant, or not as effective as they think it would be. and that
Yeah.
extra legality, for lack of a better word, out there will make it easier for loopholes that can that can damage the industry overall unintentionally. If that makes sense. I feel like I rambled
It
there.
no, it totally does. I don't understand how I don't. It seems so hard. I have. It seems so hard to with a technology that's incredibly quickly developing, with applications that are almost impossible to predict. Like I don't think I would have. I am personally quite. I mean, it's interesting to see that recruiting and HR are actually one of the most that both sides of the pond are
Yeah.
regulating that, especially. I don't think we have a clue how AI is going to be used in our lives in 3 to 5 years. And for regulators to be saying this is what you have to do in sort of a blanket way seems bad. I guess seems too
Yeah.
early to me. But also, I mean, it is telling that you're seeing Silicon Valley asking for regulation. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not coming at this with like a I don't have like a strong do or don't opinion. I know that if you ask my mom, she's terrified of AI. She thinks that
She saw the
Hudson's gonna,
Terminator, right?
yeah.
She
She
knew what's
thinks that it's
coming.
gonna be the end of the world. And I am a much more sanguine view about it, but like I don't know. I get it. I understand that opinion. And I think you should share it with many.
I I can imagine some senator aide or some congressman aide somewhere in a back room trying to figure this out and asking ChatGPT to write me a law, a policy,
Yeah, exactly.
how to
Probably pretty
regulate
good
you.
at it too.
I probably could see someone. I can easily imagine somebody doing that because they
Yeah.
just don't know.
I mean, the thing that I find like the most farcical coming out of Silicon Valley is,
Mm.
and I worked at a company called Palantir for 8 years. I very
Oh
much
yeah,
am that
no
cool, but
doubt.
it's like the there's all this talk about like, oh, it's not gonna like cause any job loss. It's like nonsense. It absolutely is.
Yeah,
This is a massive job displacement. This is going to be societally disruptive. It's very hard for me to see the other side that won't happen. And generally, if you have a situation where maybe 10 to 15 million people lose their jobs in the next 10 years, you are going to see unrest and you probably do need to have some form of regulation. So I get it. I don't know how you turn that high level problem into specific legislation without the legislation being
I,
almost silly.
the cynical side of me says since this is a presidential election year around the corner, as people start becoming displaced in some areas or just have the concerns and fears about it, it's going to become a political issue, I think. And I
I
think
mean,
that's going to push a lot of things going forward. This
who do
election
you
year.
think wants it? I can't even tell who wants to regulate more, the left or the right. It seems to be like a weird, we haven't yet carved out, I'm sure we will, but we haven't yet carved out political lines on it.
Yeah, we will eventually, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think it's so new and so concerning and questionable. No one really knows.
Schumer put out his own. He seems to be like, oh, I put out draft legislation, but his draft legislation, as far as I understand it, appears to be my legislation is we should have a follow up series of meetings to come up with draft legislation. And so I'm like, it's not actually, you haven't
Mm,
actually put forward legislation. You put forward a process to come up with legislation in a year and a half. But anyway,
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. That's worse. Maybe that's a better solution. I don't know.
When this podcast debuts, all things being wonderful, it will be on July 5th.
Oh, the day
So
of law.
yeah, so let's go forward in time. July 5th, AEDT is the law. You're in New York City and you hear about this law and you're thinking, oh, boop, this law is for real. And I have like 4 or 5 different tools in my tech stack that I use to process uh, my candidates. And I've signed contracts. I spent a lot of money. I really don't want to turn it off, but I don't want to pay up to $1,500 a day either for each technology that I'm using. And I come to you, your phone's ringing, the bat signal's up in the sky. You answer the bat signal call. What do you tell somebody on the other line who's freaking out?
Yeah. Um, I mean, the first thing that our intake process is normally like, first of all, it's not as bad as you think. These audits are not terribly punitive. They don't take very long, and getting compliant is not that scary. I think there's this idea that these audits are, that there's like you pass or fail. It's not that. The thing that's most analogous here is like the New York City requirement to post salary pay transparency. There isn't inherently a wrong answer. You just have to post effectively what is the breakout on my hiring decisions in this tool by race and by gender, and display that information. And again, that's it. It's not like there's a wrong number, but it is a transparency requirement and you have to undergo that. So we would say, hey, first we're going to figure out what tools you're using. Are they even AEDTs? Many of them aren't. Has the vendor already conducted an AEDT on their software? In some cases, they can provide that to you to get you compliant. And if they haven't, and you need to do so, we would help these companies get compliant. And, it really only takes like about 1 week from start to finish for each one of these. So,
okay. So they should be concerned, but not freaking out. It shouldn't be. They're
not, there's a lot of stress about this that I've seen. And I think it's not that hard to get compliant with this law. I think that most people are still choosing to ignore it at this point. That's their prerogative, but getting compliant is not some horrible task.
Yeah, I guess the bottom line for me, if I were a HR tech software company, get compliant fast, market it fast before everybody else does.
Yeah.
And if I were a company with a tech stack of one or more, find out if it's compliant, because I don't want to get a tap on my shoulder later saying you've been using this tool for 100 days. You haven't been compliant for 100 days. What's 100 times $1,500?
Yeah.
And you need to pay us. So I wouldn't want to do that. So I guess all that to say, don't be like an ostrich, stick your head in the sand and ignore it. As long as you possibly can, jump on it sooner rather than later. Ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure. If someone wanted to contact you specifically to learn more about your company and how you can save them from freaking out, how can they find you and contact you?
Thanks, Jim. So our company is Conductor AI. You can search us on Google. If you type in local law 144, we're buying all the Google ads on that phrase we can. So you'll probably see a link to our website. Additionally, I would email me at zach@conductorai.co, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Zachary Long. Zach@conductorai.co. We'd love to meet.
Cool beans. And I'll make it even easier too. I'll put a link in the podcast description. Click that link. That'll lead you over to learn more information and keep you from freaking out. I guess it's almost like, I just imagine how many people freaking out when July 5th comes around and the news gets out. I think the freak out will come when someone actually gets fined. That's when it gets.
I think it gets a lawsuit and a fine. That's what's going to make people move. But
yeah. Well, thank you so much, sir, for being on the Jim Stroud podcast. You are appreciated.
Anytime, Jim. Thanks so much. Bye.
Well, my time is up. I thank you for yours. I'll see you again real soon right here with a brand new episode of the Jim Stroud podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached by email at jimstroud@jimstroud.com. And one last favor, if I may ask, please rate this podcast. 5 stars is preferred, but please comment with your honest opinion. I really appreciate that. All right. Okay, until next time, bye-bye.